Hi, everybody. It's Sloan Rhodes here with your weekly podcast for the week of February 26th, 2017. I thought it'd be really fun in this podcast to talk about numerology and, in general, numbers and how they relate to our lives and the symbology of numbers. And specifically, I wanted to start with the number 1. And so for inspiration for the podcast, I did select some crystals that represent, for me, the male yang principle, which is often associated with the number 1. And so I did select the sunstone crystal, the carnelian crystal, and the hematite or the hematite crystal. And I've made videos on YouTube about these particular crystals, and you can check them out. I'll put a link in the descriptive box beneath the podcast here. But you can check them out and contemplate them as it relates to the male yang principle, which, as I mentioned, the number 1 represents. All right, so let's just get into it. So the number 1 represents this idea of, for some schools of thought, it does represent wholeness. There is another school of thought that sees 1 as the principle of duality, with 0 being the wholeness, but I'm going to speak specifically about this idea that 1 represents wholeness. And so because I want to give you some practical ways that you can kind of look at it in your own life. Because a lot of people say, I keep seeing the number 1, or I keep seeing the number whatever, and it's always coming up, and I don't know what it means. And remember that no matter what I tell you or what anyone else tells you, always trust your own instincts as to what feels true, right, and true for you. No one can give you the meaning of something. Each individual makes meaning for themselves. So just bear that in mind as you go forward, and keep an open mind as you listen, to this podcast or whatever research you do on your own about this particular topic, right? So let's get into it. So 1 does represent the male yang principle, right? This idea of the seed of life, new beginnings, the potentiality of what is yet to come. And so it's really important that if you are working with the number 1 in some way, or playing with it as a symbol or as a concept, remember that when you are at the beginning of something, it's so important to have your intention in mind, the highest level of what you want at the beginning, because that really does set the tone for what comes after 1, right? Remember, 1 is about the potential. It hasn't really done much yet. It's just kind of that seed of life. It's a flicker in your inspiration. It's the impulse, right? The flicker that creates the impulse. And so when you have that seed of inspiration, again, thinking of it as the number 1, there's this desire to take action, right? To act upon it. Again, I mentioned the impulse. That's very much the male yang principle. And, when you consider the male principle in terms of its energy, it's about taking action for a result, right? It's about putting things in forward momentum, in motion, to create something. That creative spark, the creative spark of life, the seed of life, that is what the male principle represents with the number 1. It's a very exciting new beginning. It's new energy, fresh energy. So it does feel very inspired, and it does create that impulse to take action. And that's why we go back to this idea of intent. Because whenever you are starting something, it's important to have, kind of if not a plan, an intention for what it is you want to achieve when you have this new potential coming in. And so practically, people will often say, well, what happens when I see the number 1111, or that kind of thing? And whenever you see numbers in sequence like that, repeated patterns, 1 1 1 1 2 2 2 2, for me that represents an opening, and it's your guides and angels kind of giving you a little tap on the shoulder to say, you're open now, you're available. And so when you feel that inspiration, or when you see that number, especially as it regards 1s, that means that you're in alignment now. It's a powerful master number of alignment, of harmony. And so when you see that number, remember that it has all the potential for amazing things, because it hasn't been tainted yet, right? Again, it's about this harmonious inspiration. Nothing has come in yet. No obstacles have come in yet. It's pure potential energy. And so when you see the number, say that you are having repeating number 1 messages in your life, right? Remember that you are in alignment in that moment, And so go into your intention in that moment of what it is you want. Of course, you can wish for something. There is the the old saying, oh, 11:11, make a wish. Well, what that's really referring to is that you're in alignment then. So when you're in alignment, past, present, future, in harmony with all of your soul's existence, so to speak, that's a beautiful time to ask for what you want with the highest intention because you're open to receiving it. So that's kind of where that comes from. But let's talk a little bit more about this idea of one in terms of your sense of self, right? So a lot of times ones come up because it's about a new beginning in our lives, right? You've already, say you're in the middle, say you're 35 years old, and suddenly you keep seeing ones. And so for you, that may mean that you are at the beginning of a new journey. Something new is coming in. And this is why, again, you go back to your intention. And even if you don't know what it is yet, you may be intuiting change coming into your life. If you're at the one stage, you pretty much know that you've already gone through a full cycle of something, good, bad, and ugly. You've done your review and you're ready to start something new. And you can intuit when things are going to shift for you. There's new beginnings coming in. And so remember that when you feel that energy, to keep your intentions high, because you have it's like a second chance. You can kind of look at it, but a second chance from a place where you have learned some vital lessons before you begin something new. So it's a really exciting time. Again, there's a lot of potential there, which is why it's so important to keep yourself in a very sort of positive frequency, a lighter vibration, so to speak. Now, the other thing I want to say about too is that it does stand for that spiritual unity, but remember that it's also representing duality. So what happens? What happens is we have all the potential with this number one. We feel inspired to do something with it, right? But then we need something more in order to really make it manifest. And that represents that feminine principle that comes in. Because again, one representing the male yang, and then we need the female yin principle to come in as well to provide the inspiration in a way that is from the deeper levels of what you're looking for, what you want to act upon. It's not enough to just run around wildly creating things. You want something that's going to hold that idea, nourish that idea, nurture that idea, and hold it in a way that makes it complete, as opposed to just all fiery seed, right? You need the water, you need the earth, you need all of that to really make it grow. So it's important to try to keep that place of balance as you are developing your idea. You want to pull in more energy, which is a masculine energy pulling in, right? The female yin principle doesn't pull in; it reveals from within, right? It doesn't need to take action from the outside. It doesn't need to pull in from the outside world to fill itself in. It fills in from within, from its receptivity, from its openness to the divine, and to the masculine principle, right? So they're working in balance here, and that's where the duality comes in, because once you start seeing yourself separate from the yang principle or the yin principle, then you can really get out of balance, because the wholeness is corresponding to both principles, to having the wholeness of the male principle in conjunction with the female principle, and that's kind of where things can get a little sticky. But remember, just to kind of recap, that one really is about the revelation, let's say, of the male yang principle to the divine. It's a seed of life, right? It understands it has vitality. It understands itself as being a spark of the divine. And then from that, it wants to take action upon that. It's very inspired. Again, there's that impulse to act. And what it needs in addition to really fertilize is the female principle. So it's about holding both those energies. So whenever there's that new potential coming into your life, that new energy coming into your life, remember that as you take action upon it, you want to do so where you feel inspired, not just willy-nilly taking action all over the place. It's not so much about thinking about it and making a plan, although of course it's important to be strategic, but it's about opening yourself up to the inspiration, to your intuitive nudges that go along with the active principle They work in harmony. There's a lot of potential there. And so when you look around in your life and you see, and ones come up a lot for you, or if you're doing tarot card readings and aces come up a lot, or the magician keeps coming up for you, it's about starting something new. But again, you never want to, well, I never say never, but it's important to remember that it's not acting alone, right? It's the potential, but in order for it to really become something, you have to pull in that feminine principle with it. So I hope that is kind of a fun and informative sort of introduction to wands and numerology. There's a lot of different kinds of symbolism we can go into, but just to kind of begin, I thought it would be fun just to start there. And I'll also include a picture of these crystals on my Sloan Spiritual Cafe Instagram account if you want to take a look at them there. And as well as I'll include some links for the YouTube videos on the crystals. All right, I wish you much love for the week, and I will talk to you next week.